Alright, this is Chat UTD. At the time of uploading this video, recording this video, the last video that I did on Sunday has 129 views, which is comfortably the most views that I've had for a video in 2 years of doing this. So a landmark moment for the channel, and I appreciate everyone that watched, commented, liked, etc. because it's obviously I'm well happy with that, basically. And actually, one of the comments that was made by Philip has given me the idea really for the bulk of what we're going to talk about today, or certainly the framework of what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to reference that a few times as we go along, if that's all right, Philip. Have you ever noticed that regardless of manager, formation, system, players, Man United over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, I've struggled with having any speed to their play, being able to express themselves and be dynamic, create chances, be fluid in their play. Have you noticed that we can't pass the ball 5 yards accurately, that we give the ball away a copious amount? Have you noticed that we can't break lines, that we can't press? And that, as I say, seems regardless of manager, system, formation, player. Now, I always attributed that to the fact that the owners of the football club are obsessed with making money, marketing, commerce. And what you get then is that they're going to go for players who, far from being perfect for the team and what we want in trying to create a cohesive unit as a team, they have players that will be bought on the basis of social media interactions, shirt sales, and their profile as a player. And the examples are people like, back in the day, Di Maria, Pogba, Sanchez, Sancho, Rashford, giving him grotesquely over rewarding him for mediocrity. Essentially, that's what they've done. They reward mediocrity with these players. What happens then is other players that are in that dressing room look at the highest paid players and think, well, if that's the role model, why should I be motivated to be a water carrier for the team, to work hard for the team, to do all those basics right, which United fans love? So I think this, and I call it the zombie effect, and then what you get is more and more players with a poor attitude, either because they feel like their nose is pushed out because people are getting far more money than them that are not that good, and or it just sets a tone of, if you want reward, mediocrity is the way forward. And I think that definitely plays a part in why we never seem to be able to move forward despite manager, formation, players, etc. But I want to introduce a slightly new angle to it, and it does relate to something you mentioned, Philip, and I will come back to it, to what you said. Have you noticed that since Solskjaer came and replaced Jose Mourinho, there has been no manager bounce from any of the managers since Solskjaer got sacked? Nothing changes, despite the fact that you've sacked your manager, which normally creates a massive difference in the dynamic. Spoiler alert, nothing changes because the big thing that needs to change, i.e. the owners need to leave the club, it doesn't change, and it's never going to change. And I think there's a defeat, there's a resignation, there's a sense of absolute hopelessness around Manchester United, and that's been there for 4 years. I'm just going to go through it. When Jose got sacked, rightly so, he'd reached that point where he was antagonistic, he was toxic, he was miserable. He was an overbearing, oppressive presence at the football club, and quite rightly, he was binned off. When that happened, as a fan, I felt like it was a release of a pressure valve, because he made watching Man United a tedious, lifeless experience. And whilst absolutely I could see at that point that the owners were the biggest problem, he was a massive problem. And when you replace him with someone so different, like Ollie, who comes in and he's just Mr. Man United, not particularly sophisticated, but like, let's just do it the United way. Get your foot on the ball, get it out wide, pass it forward, and go and enjoy yourselves, lads. What you saw then was a huge bounce. I think we're unbeaten in 17 games. We barely lost the game for months. We played the best football at that point that I'd seen post-Ferguson. The players looked happy. The atmosphere around the ground was different, so much so he ended up getting the job. It runs its course with him. Should have been sacked probably about a month or so before he was, but he gets sacked. Ralph Rangnick comes in. No one complained about that at the time. A respected coach, albeit that his history in coaching was a few years prior. Obviously only going to be an interim, but a smart appointment on the face of it. His bounce was 45 minutes against Crystal Palace in the first half of his first game, where the players tried to exercise his gegenpressing style. Didn't do any of it in the second half, and they never did it again. And the rest of that season was wretched, it was rubbish, awful. No bounce. Ten Hag comes in. Reputation as a manager of an exciting team in Europe, in Ajax. Played some of the most exciting football in Europe in the season when they got to the semi-final of the Champions League. A developer of players. A coach of teams that can pass the ball, retain the ball really, really well, can play at pace, can do a little bit of everything. Experienced, a good age to come into a club like Man United. He comes in. First game against Brighton at home, we get beat. We get outplayed. The second game, we get annihilated by Brentford 4-0. Again, where's the bounce? Now, fair enough, we recovered from that. Amidst mass protest, by the way. We recovered from that, but I don't think there was ever what I would call a bounce. I don't think we pulled up any trees until the World Cup kicked in and interrupted the season. So then, when the World Cup was going on in Qatar, the Glazers, to all intents and purposes, put the club up for sale. That's the way I took it as a fan anyway. I think most United fans wanted to believe that, so that's what we took from it. When the players then came back and club football resumed, there was a hugely different atmosphere around United. The fans, for the first time in 20 years, or nearly 20 years, had some hope for the first time that these twats would leave the club. And that absolutely transmitted to the players on the pitch. What followed was the best run we've had for 4 years. Not brilliant football, but we found a way to win. We dug in. We went on a great run. We barely lost the game for 3 months. That team was of the equivalent of the team we've got now. Didn't have a striker. We had Wout Weghorst playing up front for us. But that 3-month period following the announcement that the club was for sale saw us accrue so many points in the Premier League that ultimately got us in the Champions League positions, because we weren't great after March. We won the Carabao Cup. We got to an FA Cup final. So with a team, as I say, that I don't think is any better than the one we've got now, we finished third, won the Carabao Cup, we got to the FA Cup final, and we weren't too far off against City in the FA Cup final. We hit the bar with seconds to go, which would have taken it to extra time. They scored a goal after 15 seconds, which is a freak. So that's a hell of a season for a team that the season before with Rangnick and Solskjaer had absolutely stunk the place out. But the bulk of why we achieved that came in a 3-month period directly after the Glazers announced that they were probably going to sell the club. The only bounce we've had since Solskjaer took over after Jose, it's not a manager bounce, it's because I believe the players, just like the fans, are aware that this club's going nowhere while the Glazers own this club, especially the experienced ones. If you think as an experienced player around that sort of time, a Bruno Fernandes or a Casemiro, you're probably wise enough to know there's a ceiling here as to what we can achieve whilst these are the owners of our club. They're the shackles of the football club. Then all of a sudden in November, they say we might sell it. Then a couple of months later, they say this will all be wrapped up by April. There'll be new owners by next season. You're going to play with hope. You're going to play with optimism. It doesn't materialise. Everything goes back to the way it was pretty much. We finish 8th. Ten Hag gets sacked last season. Amrim comes in, again, no bounce. And I mentioned before about those players like your Pogbas and your Di Marias and your Sanchez and your Sancho and your Rashfords, and you know, over rewarding them sets a really dangerous tone. Amrim didn't have anyone like that in the squad for those 6 or 7 months that he was there, and it still made no difference. I'm not giving the players a free pass here. Professional football players on the money that Man United players are on should be able to find a 5-yard ball to a teammate. They should be able to press with cohesion. They should be able to play with dynamism and energy. They should, absolutely. But I don't think you can underestimate the impact it has when, one, you've got owners who are just rotten, and we all know it. I'm sure the players know it. And two, that shirt weighs heavy. When things aren't going well at Man United, it probably isn't a nice place to be because of the analysis that's on you. And you have to be a pretty special character to be able to deal with it. And they're obviously not special enough, are they? But I think that you cannot underestimate how important it is that the feeling and the atmosphere of a club, and the feeling and the atmosphere of Man United right now, and I think why things haven't changed over the last 4 years, regardless of manager, formation, system, players, etc., is that it's broken beyond repair. I can't prove this because it won't happen, but if today we hear that the government have said the Glazers have to leave this football club, I can almost guarantee you that in the next game we play, there will be energy, enthusiasm, pace, desire. The passing will be better. I'm not saying it necessarily will be sustainable, but it would be a weight lifted from everybody. And that's what you normally see in pre-season. Even if you can say, well, they were a bit rusty against Leeds, what you're hoping for is at least that pace and that energy and that enthusiasm to be back, and that feel-good factor of, like a couple of new signings, new kit. Forget about all the rubbish that happened last year. It's a new start. It's a fresh sort of feeling in the air. There isn't that, because the big change that needs to happen, again, is nowhere near happening. So seasons come and go. Times of year come and go. Periods of form come and go, and nothing really massively changes. You watch United in the back end of last season, and you watch United 3 or 4 years ago, you won't see that a massive difference in the way that the team played, despite a completely different manager, despite a completely different system, despite many different players. And for me, it all points back up to the top. And it brings me to Amrim. Philip, in your comment on Sunday, you said you think he's probably going to go by Christmas, get sacked by Christmas. Unfortunately, I agree. Because he hasn't got the tools to do what he needs to do. When Ineos went and got him in November, it's the first time I've seen since they've come in United act aggressively towards getting what they want and not acting like a big club. And I thought, this is encouraging. We've gone and approached one of the best young up and coming managers in Europe, which he was / is. He manages a team in the Champions League. They probably don't really want to let him go. He doesn't want to come yet, and we've said, no, we're Man United. You come now, or we leave it. And that part, I completely agree with. So part one, they've got it spot on. But with that then, part two is you've got to give him the tools to do his job. They haven't done that. I was absolutely furious in January that they hadn't given him enough. But what I was told by apologists for the club was, you wait until the summer and see what happens then. Now granted, there's still some of the summer to go, so I've got to reserve judgment to some degree, but I'm still waiting. He's got not close to enough to be able to do this job properly. So of course he's in massive danger of not doing much better than last season. I'm sure he'll do a bit better than last season. But again, with that backdrop of there's no real hope, there's no enthusiasm, the atmosphere around the club isn't very good at all. I think with all that I've been talking about, plus the fact he hasn't got what he needs, is going to be problematic for him. Philip, to another point that you made, you said like he needs to develop a plan B, C, D. I don't disagree with you, but what the owners have got to know when they approached him is that this guy has only ever in his managerial career played 3-4-3 or variations thereof. He's never deviated from that. We could say that he should deviate from it, but he hasn't ever deviated from it. So if you go and want him to be your manager as the club, unless he's a mercurial genius that can get water out, wine out, turn water into wine, which as we've seen over a 7-month period, he isn't that. He hasn't been able to do that. Then you have to give him the tools to be able to do it. And they're not able to do that. Or they choose not to do that, whichever way you want to look at it. But you don't finish 15th, get 2 players, and all of a sudden you're a great team. Or all of a sudden a team that can play a completely different system to the one they played previously. But again, I think about Amorim at Sporting Lisbon, I think about Ten Hag at Ajax. Those teams play dynamic, energetic, high-octane, wonderful football that would entertain the fans. The players that have been at the different clubs before they came to Man United, they can pass the ball about, they can press. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be in the conversation to come to a club like Man United and have had the career that they had to that point. There's something fundamentally broken about it. And it's that whole atmosphere around it. And let me take you to 2011 and 2013, Ferguson's last 2 titles. It was ridiculous. We shouldn't be winning those 2 titles with the squads we had. But I'll tell you why. Because of perception, because of psychology, because of atmosphere that he created. You hear managers from that era, opponent manager, rival managers, you hear fans, you hear players from that era. They'll say to you, we were beaten in the tunnel before we even went out. Now I can understand in 93, 94, when you look across the tunnel, why you'd be beaten before you went out. I understand that in 98, 99, I understand that in 2008. But I'm not sure in 2011 and 2013, when you look across the tunnel and you see a midfield pairing of Tom Cleverley and Anderson, a young Phil Jones and a young Chris Smalling, Rafael da Silva, a 38-year-old Paul Scholes, a 39-year-old Ryan Giggs, with no disrespect to any of those players, I don't think that strikes the fear of God into opposing teams. I know we had other players as well that are probably better players and players that would strike fear, but not many. You don't look across at them and become scared. What happened was, it was the history, it was the manager, it was the perception. And that's because we had a manager who, regardless of the owners, regardless of Glazonomics, and regardless of how many hands he had tied behind his back, every season while he was there, certainly in the Premier League era, whatever team we had, he set the precedent and the expectation that we compete for the Premier League title, and anything else is failure. And I don't want your excuses. I don't want you hearing that we've not got a good enough squad or whatever. We go and compete because we're Man United and I'm your manager. One man created that. Now that's not possible anymore. Ruben Amorim can't do that. You need that to come from the top now. And it's not, is it? It's not there. If you ever wanted evidence of how psychology plays a part in football, body language, belief in yourself, belief in what one of the senior leaders at the club is telling you, then that's it. Because that team had no right to be winning that 2013 title by 11 points. And we stopped playing with 5 games to go because we'd already won it. Ridiculous achievement. I've long since said the only way United win a Premier League title with this ownership, I said this for years, and I'd actually change it now. I'd say the only way we even become competitive again under this ownership, forget titles, is if you stumble across, as a manager, a bona fide genius that has exactly the right synergy and connection to Manchester United, who can supersede all of this stuff that I've spoken about today and other stuff in other videos, and that person doesn't exist. Or if he does, he wouldn't come and manage Man United. But that atmosphere stuff is so important. And I think, listen, some of those managers, all those managers that I've spoke about, they all deserve to be sacked. None of them were good enough. All of them were a problem, but none of them were the problem. And when you start sacking managers and there is absolutely no bounce, there's no lift at all around the club, what that indicates is that everyone at that club knows that that wasn't the problem in the first place. It's like giving someone with a heart condition cold medicine and expecting it to cure them. The Glazers need to leave. And as I said, even the mere mention of it saw the only bounce we've had since Solskjaer after Jose. In 2022, there was a 3-month bounce. So I rest my case really on that. On to some other more topical stuff. And Boomer was confirmed yesterday. Said all the right things. Said it's the shirt he wore when he was growing up. I believe Cunha also supported United growing up. That's nice. I hope that it has some impact. He had an outstanding season last season. I think he scored 23 goals and 10 assists. Can take pens. Good at corners. This is at Brentford, by the way. Bear in mind what we've been talking about. This was at Brentford, so it's if he can transfer this. Super left foot, decent with his right foot. I think he and Cunha could be very exciting signings, and definitely a good signing. So that is something to lift everyone's spirits, without a doubt. I think it's even more important that we rid ourselves of Marcus Rashford. As yet, we haven't been able to do that permanently, but it looks like he's going to go to Barcelona on loan. Again, we have to bring it back, or I'm going to bring it back to the owners. Whoever made the decision to give him 300 plus grand a week on the back of a flash in the pan run of form, wants, in football terms, wants lynching, not literally. Because that's a ridiculous decision to make, and the proof's in the pudding, in that now we can't get him off our books because he's probably not worth 200 grand a week, let alone 3. A couple of years ago, there was talk that United wouldn't take anything less than 100 million. I said at the time, he's not worth 100 million. He's about a £30 million player. He's a limited player. Where are you getting 100 million from? And I maintain that now. He's not worth any more than £30 million. Hard work will always outweigh talent when talent doesn't work hard. Is that what Ferguson said, or something along those lines? This lad ain't even that talented. So massively important he doesn't play for us. So I think that's one thing I would say about Ineos is, for the first time, a manager has come in and hammered him and insisted that Rashford's not part of it, and he's been backed. Because I don't think for a second that Ralph Rangnick would have stood for his attitude. I don't know about Ten Hag, but it seemed like everyone was beholden to Sir Marcus and his band of arse wipers that tell him how great he is. And Rubin's had none of it, which is a big plus point for me. But, we still need a striker. We still need a goalkeeper. And without wanting to be very, very negative, I must add We could get a striker, we could get a goalkeeper, and we'll improve. But I go back to what I said, I don't want to give these players a free pass. You should be able to pass the ball 5 yards, absolutely. But why is it that for 5 years now, no matter what the manager, system, formation and players happens to be, why can't we accurately pass the ball 5 yards, have decent ball retention, pass at pace, play through lines, play dynamically, express ourselves, press, take corners that are decent? Why can't we do any of that? And I think this club sucks the life out of everybody, the fans, the players, everything. Because these players, as much as they're probably not good enough, they're not that bad. And these managers who forge reputations for themselves elsewhere are not that bad. It all comes back to the same thing. Glazers out.